right here in the middle of it, okay? The election is tomorrow, and we're griping, all right?
Yes, we are.
Yep. We were just saying that, of course, they won't call the election tomorrow, but we'll know maybe where it's headed. What were you going to say, Bray?
Oh, I couldn't even recall. My brain is mush at this point.
Yeah.
With I don't know. Like I even told my mom the other day because I just started doing a D&D campaign with some friends at my house, and our next session is on Friday, and I'm like, I can't even like coherently think about this session because I know it'll be after the election results are pretty well defined, and so I'm just it's like the point of no return. I need to quick save now.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I think it's fair to say that everyone I talk to is concerned. I mean, I can't recall a single person. I mean, like people who haven't voted in years. People who have no interest in this stuff whatsoever. Just concerned, all round concerned.
It is very concerning. The number one thing for me, just as my piece on this is, I am incredibly taken aback at how, if the polling is in any way remotely accurate, how this can be, neck and neck, coin toss, anyone's game.
I feel that same way.
Bananas. All right, this is all going to be really funny looking back at this video. I think this
I doubt
episode.
that.
Put this in the Library of Congress.
I have a pit in my stomach about certain candidates winning, and I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And what I'm trying to say is that I suspect that they might actually win.
Yeah.
I suspect that Trump and Vance might actually win.
Yeah.
Well, we need to get you that hopium IV stat.
Yeah. No, I mean maybe copium. I'll settle for copium.
Well, after the fact, sure.
But in any case, we are actually here today to talk about monogamy. Are you a swinger? Have you been obeying the unalterable word of God? I mean, and by that I mean, are women keeping it in line and men free-for-alling? That's what we need. Okay. That is the word of God, I'm afraid. And today, in all seriousness, we're here to talk about maybe what you could say might be the pros and cons of monogamy and so-called ethical non-monogamy. We'll get into exactly maybe what that means as well. I'm joined here today by Bray and Trevor, two people who I can only assume maybe not be polar opposites on this issue. If you can even call it an issue, it's just a talk. Maybe not polar opposites, but we'll see how differing these guys are. I want to start us off and the viewer with some facts. All right, with some fast facts that will put us in the right state of mind. Okay, but first, maybe I could get Bray to define ethical non-monogamy. What do you think that means to you?
So when I think of ethical non-monogamy, I think that means you have a level of companionship, perhaps to a romantic level, with more than one partner at a given time. However, you do this in a way that does not leave room for, to be blunt, unethical interrelational practices between all the parties involved. Let
me give you an example for the viewer. So the viewer might ask you at this point, Bray, for ethical non-monogamy to be true, do all concerned parties have to know about all concerned parties?
I guess it depends on what you mean by no. Like if I'm with a partner, like a singular partner, and we agree that we're in, you know, a non-monogamous relationship, and that we are okay seeking out the companionship of other people. Um, I suppose it depends on the terms of each case by case relationship, whether or not you are obligated to inform your partner that you are seeking out someone else, whether you have found somebody else, whether you have engaged in any particular romantic or perhaps sexual relations with someone else. I think those all vary on a case by case basis. I think it's, the topic of discussion when it comes to ethical non-monogamy is more about what what do we feel about the practice overall, as opposed to what are the rules that every non-monogamous relationship needs to follow. Although there may be some of those out there, and I guess maybe part of that may be what we're here to talk about.
So ultimately, I think Bray has highlighted the key to an ethical non-monogamous relationship, and that is communication between the parties concerned. If it's not, as Bray says, necessary or important, that maybe the secondary partners, if we can call them that in this situation, even know about each other. All right, and I can feel through this camera Trevor waiting to say something. You know what I mean? Like I can tell. All right,
I
but look,
mm,
like I said, I wanted to establish that, and then tell you guys some interesting things that uh, I wasn't surprised to hear, but I was surprised to maybe hear in its numeric like form. Okay, so Science Direct cites one study where they say that 3 to 7% of American couples are non-monogamous. So as few as 3%. All right,
Mm-hmm.
that's 3 in 100. Um,
They are non-monogamous. Communicated that they are non-monogamous.
yeah, I
I
mean,
have a
yeah,
feeling
exactly.
that
They claim to be.
the actual total acts of non-monogamy, whether the partner is aware of it or not, are actually much
Exactly,
higher.
exactly.
I
In other words,
um
we're
I
not
can't help
counting
but
affairs
think
here.
of
Okay,
France, where it's
like
illegal to do
that
DNA
should be
testing.
the
It's
case.
illegal to do it. You can't do it. It's against the law in France for the reason of the high quantity of cheaters that are assumed to live amongst the people of within the confines of France. And I think that's kind of interesting and connects to what Bray is saying.
The people yearn for non-monogamy.
It's
All
funny you
right.
say that way, right? Because, like I say, as few as 3% of American couples might be non-monogamous, or so they claim. All right.
Right.
Remember, people, there are lies, damn lies, and then there are statistics. Okay. So, to do that with that what you will. Another study they cite says 20% have tried it. Okay. So that's 2 in 10. I
Mm.
don't trust that. I would have to do a lot more digging to see what metric they use there and so on. But I trust that first one. That doesn't seem too far of a stretch. Something that I do trust a bit more is that 17% of people polled in this study were single people. Out of single people, 17% of singles were interested in polyamory. So, not just an action of like non-monogamy, but non-monogamous relationships. So through time, and if I understand the word polyamory right, and then finally, um, one of the other studies that they cite says something that we're all thinking about. Okay, one of the most common sexual fantasies among all people is non-monogamous related. So uh, being in a sexual act with more than one partner. In other words, you and at least two others. So we're here to talk about in our very unqualified positions what we think about this. And it's one of these, things, and I feel like I've been saying this for a year now, but one of these things that I've wanted to talk about for years. And I actually wanted to comment on that for a moment, just to kind of rehash some of the old lore, so to speak. The people in front of you today were more or less responsible for the philosophy club at our university, and we had a lot of fun with it. We had a big group, and I don't know. Sometimes it felt like what we really wanted to talk about was not, uh, the time was not available. So I really appreciate these people with me. But um, Trevor, I would like to hear some first thoughts. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about the question? And the question could be framed. Um, what maybe not what are the pros and cons of monogamy, but like what are the reasons perhaps behind it? I mean, why does it seem that, you know, we have tended towards this as human history goes on? And maybe again, why does it seem that nowadays more people are accepting of it than have been in our living memory?
See, that's definitely a big, expansive question there. First things first, I actually hadn't heard the term before. Heard the phrase ethical non-monogamy. I had to look it
Sure.
up. Just to make sure that I understand it, it's something along the lines of as long as everybody is aware of the fact that you are dating other people, you and whatever partners there are, then it is by definition ethical. And that's what an ethical non-monogamous person would say. That is
So
ethical. Yeah.
just to be certain, um, what level of information could be present? All right. Let's clear this up now because that was one misconception I had. All right. And Bray seems to be a bit more well informed at this than you or I. But let's say Bray and I were in a relationship of some kind or other. All right. And it was ethically non-monogamous. What Bray and I would be aware of is that we are allowed to, maybe we've discussed this, and we are allowed to seek out other sexual partners or other romantic ones. All right. And then let's say I, Steph, decide to take you, Trevor, on a date, and we wine and dine. We end up fooling around, whatever the case is. The only thing that you would need to be aware of is that, one, maybe this isn't a long-term thing. That would be ethical. Or number two, you could be okay with it that I'm already in a relationship. As so like it's not necessary. I don't think it's necessary that you know that I'm in an ethically non-monogamous relationship with Bray. You don't have to know Bray at all. But it would, in order to be ethical in my mind, it would have to at least be that you understand, Trevor, in this example, that this isn't a long-term thing. Maybe it's just a short-term thing.
Oh, okay, I see your point. There is a transcendent point there, though. If I eventually enter into a relationship with you, I think that therefore makes me equivalent to Bray in that instance. And at that point, it
That's
would be
true, in which case
unethical
you'd have
unless
to
you.
know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so now we all understand what it is. So here's the thing. Like, why has it always been monogamous up until this point, and why is it suddenly happening now? I think that's a great question you raised. Well, I think there are a lot of positives that come from monogamy. I think there are. I think it allows for a structure, a solid structure within your relationship that you might go out and reach and go off and do more things. You know that you can rely on your partner. You know that your partner isn't going to form a strong emotional, relational bond to another person and then float away from you. You want someone that is going to be there for you, whether it is someone that will be there for you when you're off to work, or whether there's someone that will be there for you while they're going off while they are going off to work, whatever it is. And monogamy allows for a strong structure from which you can encounter reality in that way. But that's only a random guess, really. All I can really say about it is just that that is what has functioned amongst humans throughout history, and it's more or less just the geist that we exist in. I can more or less guess at exactly why we are in our current predicament of monogamy. I could think that it might have something to do with genetics in the same way that swans, I believe it is swans that are also monogamous. I could wonder at the possibility that it could be something that's a fundamental human trait, where humans form monogamous bonds with one another, on average, usually whenever tribes form and eventually form civilizations. It could be, going back a little bit earlier, like what I just said. It could be fundamentally a cultural founded thing, or it could be something that more or less arises due to the fact that it's so efficient and so useful. And it's just something that grows, not necessarily whenever a civilization grows, the act of going to monogamy. So there are a lot of branches, a lot of open ways to look at the problem. But I do want to really stress one thing. Um, I really want to stress that life is extremely complicated. It is. And I can't know who you are. And I can't know the way that you encounter reality. And I can't know whether or not polygamy or vice versa is something for you. It quite literally can't be said. I can't know what direction your life is going down. And most importantly, and I think this is really quite important about all of this, really important. When we talk about like where your life is going, and what is good and what is bad, and what is good for you, and all of that, it's something written into the sentence itself. It's something that you divine for yourself. It's a decision that you well up from within and decide. So quite literally, I can't possibly create or ordain anything for you, because all I can do is encounter it through my own paradigm. I could step back and go, that sounds terrible. I could never possibly imagine being in a polyamorous relationship. I would feel so disrespected. Yeah, I would feel so out of place. I would feel so disenfranchised. I would feel so unappreciated. I would feel so left behind.
You would feel so jealous.
Yes, that too. That's in there. I can only say that it sounds terrible, but at the same time, these are my goals. Like what I'm listing out to you are my own biases, my own psychoses, like we used to say earlier in the series. I can only list for you my own mannerisms and then tell you that you should follow my mannerisms. But at the end of the day, when you make these decisions and you encounter reality, there's not really a desired goal beyond, well, the way that you currently encounter it. It's just something you're currently doing. When you go out there and do this polyamorous thing, is it making you happy? Do you feel some sort of gripping maw or terror that you're doing something wrong? Do you not feel that at all? At all? It doesn't even occur to you. These are the defining structures at which you can understand whether or not you should enter into a polyamorous relationship, or do anything for that matter. It's really something that comes down to your very deep-seated intuitions. And as strange as it sounds, even if you're raised in a very Catholic household, in a very Christian household, in a very Islamic household, whatever it is, if you find yourself comforted and perfectly content with your relationship with these other three people and a bicycle and that, so on and so forth, more power to you. Like, seriously, I can't say anything. I literally cannot.
Okay. So, I mean, Bray, if you have anything to add to some of Trevor's points, I'd love to hear it. I have some
Yeah,
questions
so
myself.
sure. I'll throw this little bit of background in early just because I think it's going to be relevant. So, and I'm glad that Trevor brought a little bit of this up because it's very pertinent to what I have to share. I believe you had mentioned, you said something about swans being monogamous, and that perhaps it's the case that human beings are kind of have a similar maybe predisposition or some sort of genetic trait that favors monogamy. So I've been doing a little bit of reading on this. I had done a little bit previously, and then whenever we decided to pursue this as an episode, I happened to have a book on this topic exactly. It's called the myth of monogamy, and it takes a very deep dive into sort of the evolutionary angle of monogamy, particularly through other species, but also primarily human beings. And I have not read the entire thing. I'll preface that, so please take what I say, with that in mind. But I have read enough to kind of get a little bit of an opening understanding of some of the author's points. And I do recall them mentioning that some of our closest relatives in the great apes, some of the closest ones, they are non-monogamous themselves. Take for example, even the gorillas, like silverback gorillas, are often a man or a
A
male
male. Yeah.
with a male who has perhaps a harem of females.
Or as they say, a
And
harem, in
right,
the
right. But there, from my understanding, that we have discovered over time that there are in fact many more non-monogamous species than we once thought. Now, whether or not you feel that certain species, whether they be insects or birds or whatnot, don't lend as much credence to non-monogamy as humans, like in comparison, is kind of, I guess, up to the individual. But there is a lot of data to suggest that humans were once incredibly non-monogamous. But perhaps there is some a little bit of wiggle room in there because of the unique cultural traits of humanity and the unique ways in which we tribed up, so to speak. But one of the many things that I took away from these readings of super interesting points. For example, one thing I found really intriguing was a potential evolutionary explanation for the cuckold fetish that
Oh
is shared
no.
by a lot of
This is
people.
quite the episode.
Right. Oh no, it's you'll see what I'm talking about, and this is kind of, it goes in hand with what Stefan said about being interested in sexual relations, like a threesome or more, or group sex amongst many individuals. Cuckolding isn't necessarily one person standing out and watching someone else perform intercourse with their partner. They may be involved as well in some degree, or just simply, you get what I'm saying. But what I derived from this book is that they're, evolutionarily speaking, we have a drive to procreate, and we also have a desire to ensure that whenever we mate with a partner, that we are the, put it this way, most recent person to have mated with them. That way, our sperm has the highest chance of fertilizing eggs and thus producing offspring. So it is in the interest of many males, or rather, put it this way, the party who inseminates, to guard the party who receives from others who would seek to do the same. So there is sort of an evolutionary advantage with mating with someone and then ensuring that they don't mate with anybody else, bred into it. But you also are at a disadvantage if you only sit around and guard your mate and don't go off and try to mate with more other people, leaving your partner exposed to potential new mates who could swoop in and steal the the fertilization, I suppose, from you. Now, this is assuming that we lived in a place where people were having intercourse multiple times a day with different partners, back in pre whatever times, or pre-modern times, for sure.
What a day.
Certainly there are right, certainly there are people that do this today. However, it is not common at all, at least in
Why
our
not?
society. Well, that's my opinion. Why not? But I guess there's not enough time in the day really anymore to get something like that
Yeah,
done.
we all have we all got to go make money, you know.
Exactly. My point being in all of this is that part of the evolutionary process for this is that some people have developed a natural, how would I put it, response to the idea or the witnessing of someone else copulating with their partner. And that drives them to basically, for lack of a better phrase, become horny enough to want to copulate with their partner and usurp that, likelihood of fertilization. This is why people, I would say, in large part, enjoy watching pornography so much, is because they are watching someone else do the stuff, and that triggers in their brain the instinct for, oh my God, I've got to essentially get off, and satisfy this urge to, take over this, potential for fertilization. This is me very, amateur version of, translating what I've read from this book, but that's
I,
just,
I would
some of the
I would
general
like to
ideas.
I would like to comment just right now that um my understanding of why people, why so much porn is watched is because we're so visually uh uh oriented, you know,
Mm.
where we have so much of the of the brain and so on dedicated to sight, and it's our best, most evolved
Mm-hmm.
sense and so on. So I mean, I completely understand what you're saying, Bray, but I don't know if that applies to everybody. I just don't.
Well, sure, it may not apply to everyone in the same way. I don't think.
Sure.
I mean, you may. There's. I don't think that these 2 points, Stefan, between us are mutually exclusive. Uh,
For
I think it
sure.
would be fairly difficult unless there was some specific auditory or different sense for any animal to recognize, or at least closely related to us, animal to recognize that their partner had been mating with someone else unless they could see it. Perhaps there's some sort of smell that would come off or whatever. However, we don't experience that with, a screen. Um, but, like I said, I just thought I would share a couple of little points I found interesting from this. But there's definitely some scientific evolutionary evidence to suggest that we were once far more non-monogamous than we are now.
I think that even just the historical evidence shows that. That's one of the things I wanted to ask
Oh, well,
Trevor about,
yes.
actually.
Well,
Um,
and just on that point, this is one of the primary openers for this book that I was reading, was like the wealth of literary history that we have about love and infidelity and all of these things is a testament to, some sort of underlying, you know icon that is shared by all of humanity.
right. And so, I was going to bring this up with Trevor as well. I believe you claimed, at least a little, that we're historically monogamous. And I always understood, or at least, had it in my head, that historically we were not monogamous. I thought that for the most of human history, um, we were non-monogamous. And I mean, I could be wrong. And as well, we talk about Bray talks about our nearest common ancestors being non-monogamous. Even though that's a good pointer, especially the viewer or the listener, that is not good enough evidence on its own. So there are problems on both sides of the aisle here. But like what I wanted to ask about uh, Trevor, one of the pieces of research I saw directly countered one of your points, and I want to see what you think about this. You said that one partner, single partner, is more reliable. Is that more or less true?
Reliable to a particular end. Yes.
Right. And so one point that some researchers actually pointed out was that if you have more partners, not one, but more partners, you have a more reliable setup in the terms of, like, let's say you fall ill. There are more people around you to help. There's so many more people around you to pick up slack and so on. Just a thought. And as well, they talked about the reliability of sexual relations with monogamous relationships, but they also talked about more availability, perhaps, with non-monogamous. And I wanted to see what you thought about it.
Well, your first point there, what you just made about like a polyamorous relationship being more reliable, it's not something I'd ever thought about. It's not. I want to stress here that this is something I've never thought about before. I can only say that when you create a relationship like that, like a very wide, expansive one with multiple partners, it's the way that I encounter that right now. It becomes something where it's no longer about a singular person that one can rely on, or a singular person that I have trust in. Instead, it becomes dispersed, and I don't know why, but I just dislike the dispersal. I find that with the dispersal of value, I find it difficult to encounter a reliable household, or the knowledge that I am in fact in a reliable situation. I feel as if I've lost a strong bond with one other individual in return for many weak branches. None of this is backed by any sort of evidence, but I really want to stress the fact that this is an incredibly peculiar line of questions for me.
Well, I think we're in a unique situation here talking about relationships where, when we traditionally talk about other topics, we try to use as factual resources as possible. However, this comes down to a lot of just raw feelings about things because it is so personal and so related to sort of the romantic emotions that we espouse, in a relationship, as opposed to debating over, whether or not a particular policy is a good idea, or whether or not such and such entity exists or not. You know what I mean?
I would make one observation, though. Something that monogamy has that polygamy does not. Polygamy, honestly, it sounds incredibly complicated. It creates a very complex emotional life that you have to live and lead in order to exist within it comfortably. It's a sort of combination of so many different colors trying to get one particular working hue, but you might enjoy yourself and enjoy the situation. I feel there would be so many different conflicting emotions and thought patterns and worries and jealousies and this emotion, that emotion, this one, and that one. When a monogamous relationship is quite simply just it's just only one other person that you have to abstract and encounter in that emotionally relationship founded way. A lot can go wrong in love. I think that's something that everybody listening to this podcast can agree with. Like, a lot can go really badly, chaotically. There are people that go through divorces you see now. I mean, my parents are divorced. I mean, a lot of people that you and I know, listener, are divorced. You can see how cataclysmic it can be. And
I think literally all three of our parents, like parental units, are non-traditional. Like, literally all three of ours.
There we are. I can only say that it looks really hard. I've never been married, and I have to say there are times where it looks really difficult to keep together that sort of failing relationship. That sounds really difficult, and I'm sure both of you would agree. You have a lot of aspirations in this life, and it feels as if you create this sort of polyamorous relationship lifestyle, if you exist within that, you're opening the door for a lot of complexity with just your home, just the place where you live. And it becomes so complex that your ability to go out there and make formative changes in the world around you, which I think is one of the primary goals of people generally, a lot of people out there, it becomes something where you want to clean your room and then clean your house. If I want to quote Peterson or something there. And then eventually go out and start making changes in the world, helping in small ways, whether it be locally or on social media, whatever it is. People need to feel as if they're doing something important and useful. And
or not necessarily just important, but meaningful.
meaningful, thank you. That's a good way to say it. It's the best way to say it. They need to do something meaningful. And you've so much complicated your house. It leaves it with very little space for you to do much beyond it. You know,
I certainly get where you're coming from, because like, if we were to start mapping this out, right? If you have two people, they have one relationship, right? If you have three people, they have, you know, 1, 2, 3 relationships, and so on it goes. If four people, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 relationships, and and the number of relationships grows dramatically as compared to the number of people keeping up with all of it. And by the way, what do I mean by that? Let's say that, um, in a very, very traditional sense, we had one dude and three wives, right? So that's four. If you graphed them, it'd be four, and there'd be one dude. And even though, you know, let's say even biblically, these two couldn't have a relationship with each other sexually, they could maybe, in a sense, romantically, or maybe they have a working relationship, or whatever. Trevor's saying that, like, this gets so, I mean, just yarn like, I mean, and
I
what's
have to
King
say,
David to
yes.
do to pull apart? How many wives did he have again? I mean, it'd be awful, and to put each one of them in a cedar house. My goodness.
I will say one other thing. I think there's a huge distinction to be made here between bisexual polyamorous relationships and heterosexual ones.
Exactly, exactly.
Massive,
So like,
incredibly
if you
massive
had three
difference.
people
Hmm.
in a relationship, right? And these two were romantic, but these two were aromantic. These two were asexual, and these two were sexual, and these two were romantic and sexual. It's like, what do we do?
At the end of the day, let's leave aside bisexual polyamorous relationships for a moment and just focus on heterosexual ones. At the end of the day, if you ever have any sort of polyamorous relationship, whether it be two women and one man, or three men and one woman, it eventually, to me, becomes very, what's the word? Not objectifying, demeaning to whoever it is that's part of that larger unit in the heterosexual polyamorous relationship. If you're one of the three women for one husband, it starts to get demeaning. I mean, the equivalency goes away. It's no longer about I'm in a relationship with three other people. It's I'm fighting for time with my husband with two other women. That's what that is. It's what it becomes. We can talk about
Ideally,
bisexual.
though, Trevor, we would be like, Dr. Phlox, right? In a
Oh
completely
yeah,
non-monogamous situation, we'd all have three wives, and each of our wives would have three husbands, and so on.
yeah. Star Trek, of course, Enterprise. I will say one thing to connect to that. My favorite science fiction author of all time, Arthur C. Clarke. He, I believe, if his biography is correct, I believe he was. I don't even know if I should say it. It's well known. You can find it on his Wikipedia page that he was closeted, and he spent the last half of his life living in India, where that was more acceptable. And he was born initially in England. And it's really interesting knowing that, because if you go in and read his books after learning that, like rereading his work, you'll see little tendrils of non-monogamous relationships whenever he can fit them in,
I didn't
and
know
it's really
that.
interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. It is. Like, for example, he has a book, Rendezvous with Rama, where in the first book, there's this guy. Basically, it's about a starship or a little ship with a couple people in the crew. And long story short, one of the people on this crew, to develop his character a little bit, they say that he is married to this woman on Earth, and this woman that he's married to also has a husband, and they are closer than this. Like, Arthur C. Clarke really wants to stress how close these two men are. You could almost argue that it's
They were roommates.
like, yeah,
And
they
they
were
were
roommates.
roommates.
Yeah, yeah. Like, he was trying his very best to get to a homosexual relationship and in the 1950s
So like, and that's what I
when that
meant
book was written.
earlier. Like these
Yeah,
two maybe had a romantic relationship, but an asexual one.
that's an interesting concept. I can't help but completely sit in bewilderment as to how to encounter it. I really can't.
What have we got
I
here? The
can't
camera
read that.
quality's so bad tonight.
Yeah, yeah. You have 17
I
pixels.
know, I know. This is an essay that I had shared, I think, a while back about the title is very provocative, on kissing and fucking your friends, but it is about
Oh,
Very
that.
good.
Yeah,
we should all
yeah.
have more romantic companionship, a la Samwise Gamgee and Frodo Baggins. You know, I should be able to kiss my man friend on the lips out of, pure
Out of pocket.
I
Just I
love
mean,
you.
just
I
do
don't
it.
want to go on a date with you, but I love you so much as a person that I don't have any other way to express how much I do. Mwah. Like,
I mean,
you
so like
know.
Bray, I'm trying to remember. I'm wondering if any of us kissed on the beach. You know what I mean? But
I wasn't
and
on
I
that
mean this
beach.
the best way. Okay, hear me out. Hear me out.
Holy,
Look,
hold on. You got to give the audience like a second to recover from the
why would we
whiplash of
give
like,
them any context whatsoever? You know what I mean? Like, why would we do
Yeah.
that?
oh,
Uh,
that's
Look,
brilliant.
I'll talk about something completely out of context and go to another beach trip. Uh, I have a male friend, Mason. He's happily married. He's happily straight. He is completely confident in his heterosexuality. I am more gay with that man than anybody except for my gay relationships. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like it's just part of our relationship. And he just is who he is. He's a rambunctious dude. And I'm sorry, but there's also something I need to say in this case. There's a necessarily homoerotic component to sports play. All right, it's almost like we invented an outlet for it. Okay,
All right.
I mean for real, and we need to quit bashing away from it. I mean, all these Puritans that we encounter in our daily life would just be like, oh, good heavens! It's like, well, I mean, you're the one watching it. I'm not. I'm gay, and I'm not watching
Okay.
it. Like, you know what I mean?
Can
It's just like,
can
what
I
do we do?
I have to interject here. I'm terribly sorry, but there is an incredibly funny you just went viral today. There is a tweet that
Breaking news.
breaking news. Yes, please join. We need the little like doo 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 doo
Do do
doo.
do 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 do.
This was tweeted out by Harry Sisson. I don't really know who this guy is, but I do recognize one of the guys in here as the guy who did the Jubilee, like one woke teen versus 20 Trump supporters video. If you guys haven't seen it, it's a little bit of a treat. But there's this photo here. You're not gonna be able to see it. It's basically five very young guys. They look like they could be teenagers in a car, and the caption is, "We're Gen Z voters, and we all proudly voted
I've
for
seen
Kamala
this.
Harris.
This
Real
is so
men support
bizarre.
Harris." And I kid you not, the man who shot Osama bin Laden quote tweeted this and
I
said,
didn't know that.
"You're not men, you're boys. If there was no social media, you would be my concubines." And somebody
Look,
eventually like challenged him and I think said something along the lines of like, yes, he said, "Bro is doubling down and still has no idea what he said." And the guy responded and goes, "No, Jake, I'm telling you exactly what betas like you will be used for: sex and food." Mostly food. And I'm like, what the fuck?
so this is what I'm talking about, though. Like, whenever this like ultra straight narrative is pushed this hard, you have Navy SEALs who shot Osama bin Laden. A fact I didn't know. So deep in a closet, they're finding Christmas presents. I mean, like, I don't understand. Like the Greeks seem to have a good handle on this. And I've actually often thought about Greek civilization. I was sitting there in bed the other night, thinking about this topic, thinking about Greeks, of course, and how much just like how it was a very pervasive thought, and I could be completely talking out of my ass, but I don't think I am. It's a very like pervasive thought back in the Greek days that, you know, when you were young, like a young man was expected to have sexual relationships with his young male friends, and they're expected to grow out of it eventually, and like women, and take wives and blah blah blah. And so, I'm not saying we need to return to that model or anything by any stretch of the imagination. I think that you should do, once again, individually what you want to do. But I don't know. It's like when we push this ultra heteronormative narrative, this is what you get. You get people who really are actually more questioning than they understand. And I use questioning in the term of like questioning sexually wise. You
It's
don't say
repression,
you would be my concubines without meaning
right?
it. Okay,
Like, whoa,
like
bro,
I'm
on
sorry,
Maine,
that's
like
bizarre.
in front of the whole world, like that. Okay, but people, I
Yeah.
think people vastly underestimate just how much sexual repression drives the right wing worldview. And it doesn't take very much deep digging to kind of find the little clues along the way. And every once in a
So I
while,
want to.
yo, go
I
ahead.
kind of want to poke a couple holes in like y'all's frame of reference here
What a
because
naysayer.
I know, but here's one.
What
So
a
this whole
nabob.
point at the very start of this conversation, y'all mentioned, Stefan, you mentioned this whole thing about how it's all like sports, like physical touching sports have this underlying homoerotic notation
No,
to them.
I just real quick correction. I
Please
didn't say
go for it.
underlying at all. It is homoerotic.
I will say though, just to push on you on this, I am not. I'm a heterosexual person. It never really occurs to me that that is what's happening, and I will say this really does depend on whoever is the perceiver, the person who perceives the action, the person who
Okay.
encounters it and sees it with their eyes. I would say that a person who is bisexual or homosexual could, in fact, encounter it exactly like that. And a heterosexual person, it may, in fact, completely be oblivious to them. That is to say, no, what do I mean by oblivious? I don't mean that they're not seeing something that's obviously there. I instead mean to say that what you consider to be obviously there is only one aspect of yourself reverberating back to you. That's all that we can ever talk about. That's all that we can ever see and encounter whenever we see these, in this case, this act, this like physical, like two football
Right.
players running into
But
each other.
as ultimately true as that is, it is, again, the you got to ask yourself, like, even though that's true, how useful is it? We constantly
It's
come back to
incredibly,
that.
I think it's incredibly
And
useful.
one thing that I'm trying to say is
Hmm,
that it's completely painted by your culture, not
hmm.
not not just your individual, responses or whatever. And so, like, when I say that contact sports are necessarily homoerotic, what do I mean? I mean uh, that, you know two dudes, for example, are in physical contact. They are uh, they are bumping. They are, moving and so on. And I would honestly like to have some kind of hard data on this. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me. But like, I'm trying to think of the what hormone or molecule is released whenever we cuddle with people. Uh, is
If I
it,
had to guess, it might be serotonin. I'll have to double check.
be
It's
it
a good question.
serotonin or the one that starts with an O? It's like
Hmm.
um I can't remember. But anyway, I know for a fact that whenever you cuddle with a dog or a cat or another person, you release some neurotransmitters, maybe some hormones that tell you that this is a good thing. What you're doing is a good thing. And what I would like to see is some data, right, on like, a team of people, be it male or female, I really don't care, um, before and after practice, like measuring their levels of this molecule before and after practice, just to see if they get the same response. You
You were
know, and
correct. Yeah. It was oxytocin. It was an F.
oxytocin.
You're
That's the
totally
one.
correct.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
of. Hmm.
Yeah.
And so, like I say, I would like to know a measurement before and after. And why do I say practice, by the way? Because oxytocin, dear listener, might also be a response to gratification. There's so many complex pathways that Trevor might even know more than I about. But my point is that why did I say practice? There'd be no game afoot. There would be no winning or losing. It would just be a full contact physical sport practice, and they're just there to help each other get better at their game. I would really like to see some data on that. And so my question to you, Trevor, would be, what if it turned out that there were significantly increased oxytocin levels among this population of team players?
Well, here's the thing. I used to cuddle with my bulldog Brinkley all the time when I was growing up, when I was 9 and 10. I didn't have a predilection to eroticism with my bulldog Brinkley. I mean, that's just.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, so oxytocin, you can.
Sorry if I offend anybody. Hopefully not.
Brilliant.
If you stretch that out, I'm just meaning to say that oxytocin and like that cuddle chemical or that warm, fuzzy feeling you feel inside whenever you cuddle something or someone, which may very well release whenever you do like rough and tumble play, like between mice, or you win like somebody like during a football match or whatever else, or you're doing practice sessions where you try to push against each other, or wrestling, whatever else. It may very well be that all of those things, anything involving physical contact in some quantifiable level, releases oxytocin and it affects you neurologically in that way. That may be true, but I don't know if you could fit all of those within the category of romanticism or eroticism or a grab bag for both of them. I think it's far too complicated, and I think a lot of it is in fact non.
I would just point out that the us versus them narrative of team play seems awfully romantic to me, and also the full contact play is awfully. I mean, it's
right.
just,
and I mean, who's not getting a slap on the ass in the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, when I say it's erotic, I'm not talking about like in the terms of oh my god, I get off to that. I literally claimed earlier I don't watch many sports at all.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do, I'm not sitting there thinking I could masturbate to this. That's not at all what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm talking about like in the way of that, like it is. Bray, help me out here.
What see in this. I think I may know where you're going, and this is where I would have interjected here and said, I think this is more akin to the aromantic companionship. And just to preface this, I personally believe, per some of the stuff mentioned in this essay, but more of a personal view of mine, that people should be far more openly companionous with other people. Like I maybe more on that later, but to the pet examples, to that general area again, I don't have sexual feelings toward my pets. However, I do. There's an audio bite. I do.
We can forever quote Bray on this. All right, if we need to, we can go back in the files and look.
My point is that, as opposed to two members on, say, a football team, an American football team, would not likely leave the practice field and go, into the locker room and snuggle each other or hug each other, longingly, or even, kiss one another. I personally, along with many other pet owners, do regularly hold my cat, snuggle my cat at night, and kiss my cat all over the face and on the lips regularly. Some people think that's weird. I love my cat to death, and back, I will show him as much affection as I possibly can. So
and that's tricky, right? Because it has to be as much as he wants,
right? Yes, the cats
are very
particular.
What you want,
it's
Bray.
never about what I want. This is a very weirdly transactional relationship. I give him
Yup.
food, and he sometimes tolerates my love. So, my point being is that even with a pet example, there are far more instances of more romantic-ish interactions with a pet than two human beings on the same football team who engage in what Stefan would argue is homoerotic activity.
I hmm. I think at the end of the day, like we do with like literally every episode, like this literally just ends with the three of us all accepting the fact that it's far too complicated. This is one of those things where I think it kind of transcends the easy categorization. I don't think romanticism entirely includes eroticism. I don't think eroticism entirely contains all things that are romantic.
I
I
agree.
think
There's a lot
I
of
th-
overlap, but I get what you're saying.
How
Yeah.
can we tie this back to polyamory? Is a
I,
good.
I was actually going to bring that up again. So, like, you know, when it comes to I would like to talk about like in the sense of homoeroticism. Okay, like how could I tie that in back to polyamory, as Bray says? So, if I found my partner, all right, but we've been together for more than a year now. Halloween was more or less our anniversary. Of being together as a couple, blah blah blah. If I were to see him engage in, you know, uh, play with another, person, uh, if that person was female or a woman or whatever, um, I really wouldn't think twice about it. But if that person were male or a man, I would be asking some very serious questions like, who are they to you, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd really like to admit on this podcast is that I find no cosmic reason as to why we should be monogamous, but I much prefer it. And
Mm-hmm.
and I guess the question really could be coined this way. Why do I prefer monogamy without any substantial reasons? You know? Like what part of it is drawing or
Right.
attractive or something.
I'm reminded of a lot of tests that are done on like chimps and small and much smaller relatives of ours, like small monkeys and things, where they will give one monkey all sorts of little gifts and things and little pieces of bananas, strawberries, and that sort of thing, and then just watch what how the other monkeys or just one monkey responds. And it's nothing short of absolute rage.
Mm-hmm.
Just nothing short. It's just absolute, undeniable, unbelievable, unforgivable rage.
Like, why the
Uh,
hell is he getting it and not me?
exactly. And that's something I think that arises in everyone. I think everyone deals with it differently. I think most men overall, uh, most uh, most men will encounter rage in a very physical sense. Not all of them, but a sizable portion of them, and I think a lot of women handle it in a different way as well. But I think everyone deals with it. I think everyone encounters that rage. If I were to see, it's kind of funny we use rough and tumble play because it's like it's just a funny phrase.
It is
But
fun.
yeah, it is fun. But what's interesting about that is if you were to see that happen in any instance, that generates that rage. It does. All I can say is that it does. And if I'm in a firm relationship with you and you and I are capable of communicating, where I can tell you my wants and my desires, well, I want to bring on the cessation of that rage. And by doing that, I will tell you, well, don't do that. And you're going to be like, okay, well, you don't do that. And there we are. That's monogamy 101. It's the cessation of that deep inner seated rage. That's to me the smallest answer, the easiest answer to why is it that we do
Sure.
the thing we do. It's
So
all the
so
rage.
I would love to ask you
Oh,
this question, Trevor. Okay,
oh,
and I hope Bray's on board with me on this one. So there is perhaps no one I know worse than Trevor whose FOMO is outrageous. Okay, Like, I mean, Trevor has this, fear of missing out,
Mm-hmm.
like that impacts his daily life. I believe that. Okay. And so, like, I'll put it in the simplest terms possible, right? If you're sat there and you have your relationship, you're comfortable in it and so on, and I won't even ask you, such a question like, what if you get some FOMO about, being with this person that you actually really would like to be with? I won't ask you that question. That one's silly. I'll ask you this. Would you forgive your partner for having extreme FOMO about a relationship that could be it sexual or asexual, romantic, aromantic, whatever, any combination?
Can you say the first part of that question one more time so I can understand it?
Yeah, let me put it to you in the simplest terms.
Hmm.
So, since we know about your neuroses, okay,
Right.
and and your FOMO, fear of missing out, what if a partner of yours had a fear of missing out on a relationship? They, or she rather, did not want to lose the one that they had with you, but what if she wanted to have another one? Maybe even just for a while. I mean, how could you get mad?
Oh, I could get very mad, actually.
Exactly. Why? Like, of course you can get mad, but
Well,
like,
you have to tunnel in a little bit to this whole FOMO thing, this whole fear of missing out. I think most people have this feeling in some small sense,
of
or
course.
or incredibly large one. I think part of the fear of missing out is a deep seated for a lot of people out there. It's a deep seated feeling of not being enough, being insufficient, or lacking in what is necessary at this moment. And so one needs to go out there and get the thing and achieve it and get this, that, and the other thing, and have these things. That's what fear of missing out is. It comes from that deep seated sense of insufficiency. There's a better word to use in that sense.
Inadequacy.
Inadequacy. Thank you. Much better word. So that deep seated sense of inadequacy. Well, to do that, like what you suggest, is such a nail directly into the scalp of somebody like that, somebody like me. I quite literally couldn't bear the thought, the possibility. I'd rather leave. I'd rather leave.
Leave the relationship, is that what you mean?
Oh, 100%.
Well,
Mhm.
think about
Obviously, it's not what I was looking for. I mean, that's what it would be.
it.
Sure.
I was looking for this thing. I have discovered in this singular instance, if this theoretical person I was in a relationship with said this to me, well, it immediately becomes the cracking point from which our ships go in different directions. Now, I
For
hitched
sure.
my horse to yours, and you hitched your horse to mine. If you reveal this to me, you reveal that the person riding the horse was not the person who I thought they were.
Right.
And I can't comfortably carry on. Not without a very long conversation, a very long conversation, a very emotional
And I know what you
conversation.
mean, Trevor, by very long conversation. And I could feel in his tone, he means a conversation that expands over days. Like you take breaks and you come back to it type of conversation. You know what I mean?
Certainly. Asking questions all around, a very, very deep, serious one, such as, why do you feel this way? Why do I feel this way? Like, why do I feel the way I currently feel about the way you saying how you feel? And we're going to have to really dig into this and see if we can pick the pieces back up. And as scary as it is, it may very well be that one will have to go their separate ways. And that's
Yep.
just something that, as strange as it sounds, is okay. And at the end of the day, single or otherwise, one will be okay. It's going to be all right. That's all that can be said about that possibility.
I would really like to hear from Bray.
I was just going to comment on the FOMO thing, and I think that there are very few people on this planet who likely have a very small or no degree of fear of missing out for everything. Whether it's, back in the before times where everybody in the tribe is going out on the hunt, and everybody but you gets a slice of the whatever particular thing. Oh, sorry, there's no more left for you. Or you're out at a bar with some friends, and you walk off to go to the bathroom, and you come back and you walk up to the group, and everybody just erupts in laughter, and you have no idea what the joke was.
Yep.
You missed
Yep.
out.
Yep.
You feel bad. Or even worse, and perhaps more pertinent to our discussion today, all of your friends happen to be eligible bachelors, or even perhaps already in a relationship, and then maybe their partner or partners are there with them. And it's time to go home, and everybody's going home with somebody else grasping their hand. And guess what? Nobody's holding your hand as you're walking out to the car.
Yep.
That feels bad. You missed
That
out.
feels rough.
So it's completely understandable if we extend this off to a point where you're already in a relationship with somebody, where perhaps there's some level of expectation that, your desire can be satisfied. Whether in this particular examples that I've given, you were hungry and you wanted food, but you missed out on what was available, or you wanted some sort of social interaction that happened while you weren't around, and so you missed out. Same thing with sexual intercourse. There was opportunity for you to have, perform this act, but things didn't go your way, and you missed out. And perhaps for some people, it is doubly effective in the fact that it's somebody that they usually, have sex with, goes off and perhaps has, sexual intercourse with a different partner. And it's like, well, now I feel left out. But I don't think that that's necessarily the case for everyone. I think there are people who can tolerate that, some people better than others. And so that doesn't become a problem. And this is something I would include here, is that this is a behavior that I try to temper within myself. I would consider myself polyamorous. I'm perfectly capable of having a partner and allowing them to do as they please, within reasonable confines of an established relationship, is what I mean. I
Certainly.
don't feel, any particular way. I would enjoy having multiple partners as well.
Mhm.
My point here is that, it's not just something that you can just whimsy, say into the world, and it is so. I have to
No.
constantly remind myself, I think it's ridiculous that certain couples will be like, take a classic example, like a woman, or a heterosexual male female couple are walking down the street, and a man sees another woman who is very beautiful, and is caught looking at this woman, by his partner, and she starts to interrogate him about why he was taking so many, such a long gander at this other woman, and suddenly he feels like he has to cover his tracks and explain that, oh, I was, that's not what I was doing, or I only love you, baby. It's no big deal.
Mhm.
Don't, whatever. He shouldn't have to do that. He should be able to say, I think she's a very beautiful woman, and the woman should be able to understand. And this is vice versa. I'm not saying this is purely a woman thing. Men are some of the most jealous people on the planet, um,
Yep.
and the same goes for that. My point is that people should be able to be more open about things that are just factually true. You cannot convince me that the man did not think that that other woman was beautiful. It's factually true. He
Well,
should be
so
able to be
like
open and
let me
honest
interject
about
a
that
tiny bit
without
here.
affecting their relationship adversely.
So like, you know, whenever I'm with my special someone, right? Whenever, let's say we're going to a movie or whatever, and we see an actor that we can both really get behind.
Oh, this is really class. Yeah.
We talk about it. We're that comfortable in our relationship. We talk about it. However, in that exact situation, if we were going down the road and I caught him looking at someone way too long, or whatever way too long is in my head.
Right.
And by the way, if I was having a really shitty day, way too long in my head could be like,
Mm-hmm.
and if I was having a really good day, maybe I would look with him. Who knows? But my point is that like there's something about it being in person. It hurts my feelings. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm not gonna sit here and bullshit about like how uh I've meditated on this and I've overcome this obstacle or anything like that. I have not. I mean, like I say, it's something about the impersonality of like the actor, you know, and something
Well,
about
yeah, exactly.
the closeness of it being a person just over there. I don't know. It hurts my feelings.
Right.
This is a complete aside, but like one part of your explanation there of this thing really fascinated me. Like it really paused me for a second. I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. Where you mentioned like your like beloved looking at somebody for too long, and like who knows, maybe I would look too. That's an aspect of uh, of homo or bisexual life that I
Oh yeah, I didn't even think
completely
about that aspect of
that
it.
I completely am like brick wall to. That it would
Right.
never even occur to me at any particular time. It's very that wouldn't even possibly occur to me. So I thought that was really interesting. Like
Sure.
that's an aspect of this whole
Now, so Trevor,
jealousy thing that's very different.
it's funny you mentioned that, right? Because so like I tell people I don't have a type, and I really honestly mean that. My friends, my family, they constantly poke fun at me for dating the people I do, and it really is my explanation that it's just kind of like random. Only the ones like worth keeping around for a while, happen to kind of look, in this general aspect. If that's a type and I don't know it, whatever. I still say I don't really have a type, and he does. Like he certainly has a type, and so like those, regardless, types can overlap. There, of course, there's going to be some overlap somewhere, and like I said, I just didn't even think about it that way. We can talk about the same actors. You know what I mean? And it's so funny to overhear our conversation about women like actresses. Like we go, she's gorgeous. That's the end of the conversation. Like that's all we have to say about it. We don't go into detail. Like it's so funny.
Right.
But like if there's some actor that we're both talking about, we can talk about it for longer. You know what I mean? Because we have more to talk about. I don't know. I don't know. It's funny.
That is
Yeah.
really funny. That's a whole can of worms of relationship channel that is completely not
But
even like bricked off. It's just a wall. It's not even
but do
potentially
Right.
you
part of
have
the
FOMO about
conversation.
it? That's the real question. You
I
know?
I don't know.
more to the point of this particular topic, this is a little bit more of, like I said, the things I have to temper myself about is that I think everybody should remind themselves, because this again is factually true. Look, I can be a very factual person. I like to get down to the root, the real, the reality of
I think we
things.
all do.
But I think everybody should have a place in their lives for the romantic, like the romanticism of life, and be able to engage with that honestly and truthfully at the same time. And part of that is recognizing that in reality, you are not the only person who can satisfy your partner in whatever way that entails, romantically, sexually, just purely socially.
And it stings.
Yes, it hurts. For some reason, it hurts. That you cannot just be the sole person on this entire planet of the billions of people that there are to satisfy your partner's every craving, desire. There will always be somebody else who can do that. Maybe better than you, maybe worse than you, but they will always exist. And I think reminding yourself of that is healthy, because it
It has been for
detracts
me.
from your capability. Sure, it detracts from your capability of thinking that you are the only person that can possibly, do these things. And I think it helps some people perhaps look at their partner as more of an individual and less like, for lack of a better
Transaction.
phrase off of the top of my head, like their property or their possession, rather, is a better way to
Right.
look at it. And I think when you do that, and it becomes more interpersonal and not more possessive, that opens up sort of the capability for like, hey, it's okay if you want to go do things with other people, because I understand you may not always want that from me. It may be that you want something from somebody else that I can't give you right now, or I can't give you, period. It's like that's completely understandable. However, there, number one, are oogles of people on the planet who are incredibly abusive and like, I don't even want you going and hanging out with, like, oh, my wife or my girlfriend can't have guy friends. That's a red flag. Like,
Yeah.
bullshit. Get out of my face with that bullshit. Vice versa. Same thing. Like, man can't have female friends. If he is, he's fooling around. Like, not the case.
Well, I'll lay one on Trevor again for you, Bray. If my partner told me I couldn't have guy friends, I'd be like, I'm not sure what you want from me. That's all.
Right.
That's pretty much all I got. You
Right.
know what I mean?
And I
I
mean,
don't
these are
know.
just deep-rooted natural jealousies that I think we have that are also perpetuated by our culture, particularly by religious organizations, unless you happen to be fucking Mormon or something. But it also goes back to some of those evolutionary things that I have mentioned that I conveniently have literally just blanked on the exact points I was going to share. But that being said,
I think
yeah,
you're touching something there, Bray, that I think is really interesting. I've reached a different conclusion than you do, but I do think it's interesting that we both think about this. So I think life is. I saw this. I read this beautiful book years ago. I forget what it's called. Oh, What the Buddha Said is what it's called. I no longer really follow what like the guy who wrote it. Long story short, I don't really follow this guy very much anymore. But he had one phrase that I thought was really interesting. This one paragraph that he wrote. He said, "Life necessarily is a caravanserai. It's a place you can stay for the night, but you have to go, and you hold so tightly onto the things around you to possess them. But the tighter you grab a hold of them, it seems the faster they flow out of your hands. Wherever you go, you can clench as tight as you want. This possessive feeling, you can clench and clench and clench to keep these things that you love, whether it be your loved ones, your husband or your wife, or your children, or your possessions, or anything. But it necessarily flows out of your hands. Necessarily. This is what life is. This is what life is. I'm reminded of one of the best things I've ever read, the Bhagavad Gita. The Song of the Lord is the translation. Long story, that book. We could do an entire episode about it. But there's this point where at the very end, where Krishna, who is this personification of God, who's also a personification of the reader. If you ever take the chance to read it, I want you to read it a few times, but at least the third time, I want you to read it as if you are Krishna, because that's one of the central points of the book itself, that you are, at the end of the day, you are the self. You are that which from which everything is derived. And he says at the very end of this book that I, in time, and I will take away everything that you love, as I always have done. It was a very profound text. Now, why do I say all this? I think this realization that you can't possess anything, truly, and the harder you try to, the more pain and suffering you will well up within yourself. I think this realization is one that has been felt across time. I think this is something you'll find in many places. I think you'll find it in many sages throughout history. I think you'll find it in the East. I think you'll find it in the West. I think usually, though, when people make this realization, it leads not towards a bonobo-like polyamory, where you realize it can flow evenly in all directions. It usually results in a cessation, in the deep realization that it's all this want to go around and this sort of appetite of self, or the sharing self, sort of dissolves, and you just sort of be perfectly content with the now, and you let go of this want to satiate some sort of erotic or any sort of desire. It
Trevor, I
becomes a
think
cessation of all of it.
what you're advocating here for is the Jedi Order. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose.
Does that make you a Sith?
But it is funny that you mentioned that, because obviously the Jedi Order does take many hints from, I believe, Buddhism, right? And sort of the complete cessation of sort of romantic feelings, or at least the not the cessation. It's after all, I think it was Obi-Wan Kenobi in the animated series that said it's not, that we aren't supposed to have these feelings. It's that we're supposed to basically repress them.
Okay,
Or
Sith. All right, that's not what we said. Okay, it's but we don't have time for all that.
right.
Trevor,
And we don't have the
if
time in
you're
the day.
if you're done, I'll
Parallels.
close this off.
Please do.
So, I knew before we started this episode, I knew exactly what I wanted to at least talk about at the end, and this is especially for anyone younger than me out there that needs to hear this. I'm thinking about people who would be old enough to be my younger siblings and things like that. I approach you as an equal, okay? And if you're older than me, I hope you've already kind of learned this lesson. But something about me that's just something I've had to deal with and accept and so on is that I want too many people. I want too much of other people's time, and certainly at some point in my life I felt like I deserved it. And nothing could be farther from the truth. I think that whenever you're younger, you have a lot of those feelings, and maybe I still have them. Maybe in 5 years I'll think to myself that in this time that I wanted too much of people's time and felt I deserved it. The point I'm trying to make is that I've been through the modern dating scene a lot, a lot, and there's no comfort in it, none, truly none, if you don't understand what you want. Okay, like at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself. I will not tell you to take care of others this episode. You must take care of yourself. Once again, if you don't know what you want, no one can guess that for you or supply it. You don't know it. Okay? And so I can remember in my college days, for example, just, going from one person to the next. Once again, not knowing what I wanted. And so, like I say, they could not supply it. Whatever I was missing, they couldn't supply it. And I can remember it being some of the most, just like self-inflicted torture that I've ever been a part of. When it came to evenings where I didn't have anybody I could grab their attention, it was just awful. It was just the worst, and it's because you fall into these patterns of shame, even of like having this wonderful feeling, and then having this equal, rather this opposite but not equal feeling of of shame. And like I say, especially to those who are younger than me, maybe those of you who are going to university and things like that, moving on with life and so on. I just honestly don't care if you're monogamous or non-monogamous, or if you're this or that, if you're, gay, bi, hetero. It doesn't. None of that matters. What I'm telling you is that you must know what you want, and in its absence, you will just hurt. And so, like I said, take care of yourself.